Enjoy the show.
Beaming at you from the depths of the internet.
This is the Temple of Geek Podcast, your one stop for all things geek.
All things geek.
Welcome to the Temple of Geek Podcast. My name is Monica, and I will be your host as we discuss the first 4 episodes of Star Wars Andor. If this is your first time tuning into the Temple of Geek Podcast, welcome. The Temple of Geek Podcast has been around since 2012 and is hosted by a variety of geeks from the Temple of Geek team. Here we cover all manner of geek and pop culture, news, and events. To our returning listeners, thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate you being here. Returning to the podcast today are 2 of our Temple of Geek contributors, Stacy and Elizabeth. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Stacy, I'm very excited to have you here. We were just saying
I'm
earlier,
excited to be here.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked Star Wars was when The Last Jedi came out.
Man, that's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, and for anybody
and my thoughts have changed.
Have they? Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But anyway.
Well, for anybody listening, Stacy used to host the Temple of Geek podcast along with me and Daniel. And so I'm very excited to have you back. And then, as always, Elizabeth, always great to have you back.
I love doing these.
Can you guys do a quick introduction, say hello to our audience, and tell them a little bit about yourselves?
Who do you want to go first?
Sure, you can go first. You can go first,
Okay.
Elizabeth.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth, aka Lady of Time Cosplay. I help write for Temple of Geek, mostly about Doctor Who stuff, but also some Star Wars and some Disney. I also love to cosplay, and I just really love talking about all things geek.
Excellent. Yeah, my name is Stacy. I've been a part of the Temple of Geek for a while. Wow, a long time, actually. I am a co-host.
10 years, Stacy.
10 years, I know. That's cool. That's just cool that we've been around that long, it's just really cool. And just got a lot of wonderful people that work with Temple of Geek. But I'm co-host of Retro Rebel Gamecast. Amanda and I do a sometimes weekly podcast about gaming and gaming related topics. But I also love Star Wars, Marvel, comic book stuff. So, yeah, pretty much all things geek as well. So I probably have input, even if it's just a little bit, on just about anything that we talk about here at Temple of Geek. So,
Well, awesome. So today we're going to talk about the first 4 episodes of Star Wars Andor, which is debuting right now on Disney Plus. The first 3 episodes have already hit, and the next episode will be out September the 28th, which will be the same day that this podcast episode drops. So we can talk all the spoilers. If you have not watched the episode, please pause and come back because there will be spoilers. So my first question before we take any deep dives, what were your overall thoughts on the first 4 episodes?
I really loved them. The story is so interesting. I mean, to see just all this progression of how, because I remember at the Star Wars Celebration panel, they did say about how when we first meet Cassian, we're not going to recognize him, that he's a very different person. And so I love that we're going to get this whole story of seeing how this guy goes from being kind of doing stuff for himself all the way to being willing to sacrifice himself so that these plans, that the Death Star plans can get into the right hands so that they can stop the Empire. And I really loved it. The music especially, I really loved, which wasn't something I had thought about, but then the title sequence came up, and even though it's very short, like a lot of streaming service, titles are, I was like, yeah, I love that. Even in my notes, one of my first bullet points in my notes for when I was watching the screener for episode 1 was, ooh, I love the music.
oh yeah, I think the music was great. I'll tell you the thing that struck me the most about this, that overall loved it. In fact, I'd go as far as to say this so far, if I was just basing it off the episodes we had a chance to watch, is my favorite of the Star Wars series so far. As much as I'm a huge fan of The Mandalorian, the whole culture, I've got my own kit, I've got my own movie quality costume. This is the most epic I think that Star Wars shows have been, or at least they were able to make this seem like a much bigger universe. Whereas, and we can get into some of the details, but I just felt like this was the most epic of the shows so far that I've watched. And if it ends as strongly as it has begun, it will be my favorite one so far.
Yeah, I was surprised at how much I liked it when I first watched it. And I love Diego Luna. I'm here for any Mexican actor, right? And he's from the same area in Mexico that my father's from and things like that. So it's very exciting for me to see Diego Luna with his accent on the screen. So I kind of already went in because I love Rogue One and I love Diego Luna, kind of thinking that I would like it. But I was surprised in the ways that I liked it. It was not, I thought I was going to like it like I like Mandalorian, but it was different. I definitely saw it like a very different show. And so I think I was surprised by that. And then when the credits rolled, I realized it was the same guy who did the Bourne Identity franchise, the Jason Bourne franchise, which I happen to love and something that I watched with my dad a lot. So I was like, oh, okay, I can see why I like this. I have already liked a lot of his work before. So,
yeah. One other thought that I had is not that adults cannot enjoy Star Wars Rebels, but it definitely feels like the more grown-up version of Star Wars Rebels, even with how it starts. I feel like where it's starting out, 'cause like with Ezra, it kind of starts out where he's like just interested in the blasters for what he can get out of them. But it'll be really interesting to see, how Cassian goes from just being in for it to be looking for his sister and looking out for his family to this larger journey of becoming, one of the probably most important rebels in the Alliance eventually.
Well, and I think that's a good segue into my next thought was what did you guys think about the tone shift? Because I do think that it's not geared towards children in the way that most Star Wars is geared towards children.
No, definitely kids can still enjoy it, but I think there is a lot more layers to this one than there is some of the other ones, because even like the original trilogy stuff, it's pretty cut and dry, bad guys, good guys, one other thing that really struck me was we don't see the Empire in the first 3 episodes at all. We see representatives of the Empire, the corporation is under their jurisdiction, but it's I don't know. Yeah, it's very different, because when they first said spy thriller, I was like, oh, okay, whatever, but I'm like, yeah, this is definitely, much more, it's less big space battles and more about the small different things, like he says in one of the episodes where he's just walking in and acting like he belongs, and it may not be as big boom crash thrilling as some of the other the space battles, like I said, but it is very fascinating, and I really am looking forward to seeing more of that side of the rebellion.
Yeah, I agree actually that this is, I said in my first comment that I felt like this was the most epic of the shows so far, like the biggest universe and the most grounded. Even though it is, what we typically see with the space battles and the Jedi and all this other stuff, which seems so fantastical, this is so much more relatable. And like you said, in terms of tone, more adult. I would say that unless you're a young adult, you probably won't appreciate, that goes for many kids shows or shows that are geared towards kids. There's adult humor, or at least humor for adults. But in this instance, it just starts right from the beginning with a tone that says this is not your typical Star Wars show. The themes just right off the bat, you're like, this is just something different, something that I haven't really seen. You haven't seen in Star Wars this explicit, I don't know, ever, outside of the Twi'leks in Return of the Jedi. But even that was a slave, but you didn't really get as a kid, I didn't really pick up on anything else because they never alluded to anything. That was a brothel. They're in a brothel, and so that really changes, I think, the tone and just makes this so much more real. Like everybody's not this virtuous person, or every single person that you see so far on this is gray, some version of gray, and so even though I know that it will become more clear as the season goes on, not a lot of good guys, so to speak. So yeah, I was right from the beginning was my interest was piqued. So
yeah, absolutely, and I agree. I think that like in the grand, like looking at Star Wars as a whole, we do see these signs that like there's brothels, there's bars, there's shady things happening, but it's like so glossed over. You barely scratch the surface. It's very campy, right? Whereas this is in your face. You cannot deny it, right? It's very clear. Like everybody's got their hands in some pocket. One of the things that like I noticed was even the Cassian's friend Bix. He even accuses her of like skimming off the top. So like there's no clearly like moral like compass here. Like everybody's just in survival mode. So I really liked the tone shift, and I think we started to kind of see a little bit of this in the book of Boba Fett, where you start to see like the gangs and how they operate and the spice runners. You see a little bit of this in like the animated series and Clone Wars and things like that. But this was very grounded in reality, and it felt a lot more real. And just like the whole bar scene, the very first scene when you see like Cassian entering into that brothel and he goes, just the shift in tone and everything. I don't know. It was.
He goes down the red light district. I mean, he's walking down the steps through the red light district, and then goes into a brothel. And if you pick up on all the insinuations. No credit, this is a cash only place where we don't talk about any of the details. You come in, you better behave,
No comms, no nothing. Don't be taking pictures here.
Don't be taking pictures here, And they did that same thing, I think, really for this world. And the cinematography. I mean, there's just so much that I could talk about. When you watch the Book of Boba Fett, I'm not saying it looked cheap, but it was very bright. Like you saw, it was almost like I could tell you were on the, what's the soundstage that they invented specifically for Mandalorian? You could, what's it called?
I know it.
On the tip of my tongue, but yeah.
Right on the tip of mine too. Well, you can tell that's where they are in Book of Boba Fett. On this, I felt like you were on that planet. Like they were on that planet, walking down that street. I don't even know what work, is it Hassan or whoever is a friend that came to look for him in the first episode?
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what work he does, but it seemed legit. He comes out. You've got all the gloves and stuff. They just created such a lived-in world that you just forget all about that. This is not a real planet. That they're not actually. That this is a set. It just seemed very real, very grounded, and was shot in a way different than any of the other series so far, and built on those things that we've seen in Rebels. Just the area of the gray that everybody's trying to get by, that this rebellion is ugly and dirty and guerrillified so yeah, there's just a lot to unpack. So
yeah, and I really love the clothing that's going on this show. The costumes look Star Wars while also looking functional and like real, and like the whole time I've been like, how do I get my hands on these? Like
yeah,
said like a true cosplayer.
Yes.
But all of their clothing just looks really great, and I really loved how the Sentry police officers, the corporate police, right? Because they don't work for the government or anything. They're like rent-a-cop, security guards, whatever you want to call them, right? Their uniforms look very corporate. So they're so different from like the Empire and everything. Yeah. You could tell this is branding. This is like, like the brand colors and things like that. And I was just like, wow, this is really interesting just how they did this whole thing.
Yeah, I thought those costumes were really neat too, especially because I made Cal Kestis's outfits from Jedi Fallen Order, and I spent a lot of time staring at that costume, and it was really interesting because because it seems like the planet, at least the planet that Cassian is on, that they're part of supervising, is a scrapyard, and Cal Kestis is from a scrapyard planet too, Braca. And it was interesting to me because even though, like in Fallen Order, they don't have uniforms necessarily, but he has the patch on his arm, which I spent a lot of time staring at, and it is that blue and orange because it's the Scrappers Guild. And so I thought it was really cool that they even paid attention to that kind of detail, where they had the blue and orange worked into those costumes and some of the stitching. That's me being very detail oriented, but yeah. And I also really liked now I can't remember, Cassian's homeworld. Kenari, thank you.
Yeah.
You could tell all the kids, like, a lot of their outfits, because they all had like very similar color palette, and if you looked, it kind of looked like it was like fabric stuff, scrounged from like possibly other wrecked ships or other things, because they had like rivet holes in them that looked like maybe they were curtains at some point. I could go on and on about the
there's also a
stuff.
point where one of the costumes looks like it's a orange rebel pilot that one of the kids on Cassian's area is wearing, and so, but even if you look at the clothes that, like, they do a close-up of like young Cassian's outfit. They do a close-up of him, and all of a sudden he has like, you could see the wear on the leather. It just looks so authentic. And even the tools the kids had, it was like made out of like old pipes and old things, and it was crafted of just literally things that they scrounged together and found. And I thought, maybe this is going, I meant to talk about this later, but I was really impressed by the planets and the different planets and how well you can tell the difference between planets.
For sure.
And I really loved how they showed the exploitation of Cassian's homeworld, and how, we mined the resources that we wanted, and then we literally left children abandoned there. We were like, peace out, we're out of here.
And and they allude to stuff like that from the Empire in the Ahsoka book, in a number of the new Star Wars, basically the new canon, about how the Empire goes in and has done this, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but to your point there, they decimate, and they have the Empire is not all it's cracked up to be, and they have this corporate arm that is trying to sell what the Empire is and the good part of it, and then you have this planet Ferrix that doesn't want any part of it, and it's far enough out there where they don't really have an arm to reach to it, but and so they kind of just let them do their own thing. But there have got to be many planets like this that kind of function that way. But it showed that it's not just Darth Vader. It's not just the stormtroopers and these space battles. They're in other ways, just regular people are destroying other people's lives and decimating planets and impoverishing people. It's just very, very real and grounded.
And one of the things that you mentioned right now is it's not just Darth Vader, right? So one of the things that the Karn, the one police officer the corporate police officer that's after Cassian, he is exactly the personality that would end up working for the Empire. He's the kind of personality who's looking for validation, he's looking for power, he's looking to move up, and he's willing to sell the propaganda of the Empire, right? So he's exactly the type of person who would be attracted to like an Empire, like the Empire or whatever.
He drank the Kool-Aid.
He did. Yeah, I know. When he first popped up, before we realized that he wasn't really necessarily great at his job, I had the thought, I'm like, because he was so we gotta actually follow up on this. I'm like, are you gonna be this series? Did the blue guy? Why can I not think of his name? From Rebels. I have my notes. I should have typed them up. But yeah,
the one that's the last of his kind.
The The guy that
Thrawn,
disappears with Ezra. Thrawn, thank you.
Yeah.
When he first popped up and, he was all like very straight-laced and like, we need to actually look into this and da-da-da-da-da. Like at first I was like, oh, are you going to be this series Thrawn because you're like paying attention to these details? But then it was like very clear. It's like, you're not that good at your job.
No, he definitely, Nate pointed out to me when we were rewatching it, was that he has more of a Hux vibe.
Yes.
Like he's
But a better Hux. But better.
Yeah.
Hux was well, yeah, but Hux could have been such a good character. And you could tell, and that's neither here nor there at this point, but between those three movies, that Hux was written by three different people to be three different characters. He could have been a yes man. He could have been a zealot who was just overconfident in what the message of the Empire. And then he ends up being, Fulcrum, the effectively he ends up being, this insider for, which is just silly. But this character is written so believable to he's ambitious. He thinks he knows what, because he knows everything in the book. He is the equivalent, from my experience, he's the equivalent of like a military officer that has seen no real war, has seen no real battles, but thinks he knows everything because he's read all the books.
Oh, now I know who he reminds. He reminds me of Frank Burns from MASH. That's who I was going for.
There you go. Okay, that's a good reference too.
He's not very good. He knows all the rules. He knows everything that they're supposed to do, but man, he's just going to annoy everybody while he's doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very clear, like, for example, the chief inspector knew what was going on. He looked at the report and was like, oh, these guys were at a brothel they cannot afford, and while on duty, which is already a bad thing. And he was like, this is just going to blow up in our face. Just cover it up and make it look like they died in an accident helping us out, And I thought that was really interesting where he was like, he knows he's doing something wrong. He knows the guys probably deserved it, but he probably has his hands in so many pots that he's not trying to cause any attention or problems to come to him. So I thought that was really interesting. One of the other things I wanted to ask you guys about is, what did you think about the 3-episode debut?
I definitely think they made the right call doing 3 episodes at once. Not because some people were like, oh, it started so slow. I'm like, it doesn't start slow, but I do appreciate that we got the full 3-episode story to start with, because those first 3 episodes are all one story. And a lot carries across those episodes between seeing what Cassie and, the trouble that he got into and how that goes through, and also the flashbacks, which I could talk about those flashbacks all day. That was wonderful. I hope we see more of his early life, because I have so many more questions as to what was going on with that. But I definitely think it was a really good idea. It almost felt like its own mini movie. I mean, there would have been like a runtime. It's like a little over an hour, I think, with those 3 episodes tied all together. I think they made the right call doing 3 episodes at once rather than one at a time, because it gives you a really good flavor of what they're going for, and you get to know more about these characters without having to wait every week, especially with the story that ties all together. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you needed the foundation. I don't know that you would have had enough to kind of chew on week to week without at least 2 of those episodes.
Exactly.
So you get a little bit of the backstory of Cassian, and then you also get the foundation for where the story's going and why he's in peril and needs to kind of make a pivot in his life. So I think it was a very good choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And during the interviews with some of the press junket interviews, Diego Luna told a reporter, he said this was his first time doing this kind of long form storytelling, right? And he said to him it felt like 4 movies, which it is 12 episodes. So the first 3 would be 1 movie, for example. So I think that based on what he said, I feel like we're going to get a bunch of mini movies leading up to it, maybe sets of 3, for example. But I thought it was interesting that like the first episode, you have, the introductions, right? Introductions to how the corporation works on the planet, the corporate police, things like that. Introduction to Andor, his family, his backstory, and then just basically intros, like why he's on the run, why he's stressed out, and why he needs to get off planet or whatever. And then the second episode was a lot of like the effects that the Empire has on communities, that it has on people, because the second episode is really showing like the kids abandoned on that planet, the way that the workers and everybody deal with the police and things like that, and how they just kind of are like struggling to, I think Ferrix is the name of the planet that he's on, how they're just kind of struggling to get by, don't want to ruffle any feathers, things like that. And then episode 3 is really oh wow, this is what happens when you like cross that line, when you don't stay in your lane. And
right.
Yeah. It's where everything just kind of starts falling apart for him. You feel bad for him, but it's also like, well, this is where his story starts with the rebellion.
And I think with episode 4, we're going into that next set of storytelling. So like had the first 3 episodes, it could have just easily been a movie, right? Like,
for sure.
And especially the way that they show like Cassian on the plane and the parallels between the flashbacks and how they end up at the same place where he's taking off and having almost like the same kind of experience leaving like the 2 planets. That would have been a great end to a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved the editing in that part. I was just like, this is so good. Like I love which is weird. Like I don't usually pay too much attention to editing unless, but I was just like that, how they drew that parallel between 2 very different parts of his life, just ending and then beginning. It was so fascinating. And again, I hope we learn more about his life after he left his home planet, because I think there's a pretty interesting story there, to be honest. So
yeah,
we'll learn more.
I think we will, and I think that this is the decision to his interpretation, I guess, of how this is a little bit different. I think that's a lesson that some of these other shows could learn or take a lesson from themselves. I don't know if y'all have watched Sandman on Netflix. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about that, and although it's not perfect, but I really enjoyed it. But I noticed that if you watch the whole season, and I actually binged it, so it was a lot more apparent to me. There are common threads throughout the season, but you don't necessarily have to watch it. You don't necessarily have to watch it in order. You have to watch certain episodes in order, to get the gist of what's happening. And so there were multiple movies within that show as well. You had this whole thing where he visits Lucifer, and you had this whole thing where he's got the serial killers, and you have all these other things. They're separate stories, but there's a constant through line, and so I think that what that does is that prevents that filler episode that's unnecessary, that just seems to stretch out time, that you didn't really need. And everybody complains about it. Even She-Hulk did a tongue-in-cheek moment where you're like, filler episode, but she looks at the camera when she says it. I think you can get around that by having transition episodes and things like that, which could be considered a filler. But the way they're doing it seems like they're going to get around that hurdle that so many other shows seem to fail or trip over.
Yeah, and I think we see a little bit of that with like the Book of Boba Fett, where I don't think it worked as smoothly with the flashbacks for the Book of Boba Fett. I think that they worked a lot better with Andor. I think that's what the Book of Boba Fett was trying to get through and have these like parallels, because a lot of the stories in the past and in the future for Boba Fett was very similar, right? The lessons learned and things like that. But I think that Andor just did it a little bit more eloquently.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I also thought it was a really interesting choice that they left the the language that those kids were speaking untranslated. Even if you turn on the captions, you do not know what they are saying. But I feel like it can be hard to find really good children actors sometimes, but those kids did such a good job. Even though you do not know exactly what they're saying, you can tell. Like the first time I watched the episode where it gets to the point where Cassian is going off with the other kids and he leaves his sister behind, even though you do not know exactly what they're saying, you get that feeling like this is a goodbye. They don't know that it's a goodbye, but, you know, you get the sense of like, you know, be careful. Oh, I'll be back. But you know, just from what's already happened that he won't be back, even though you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And the way, like, even when that girl leader got blasted by the person who they thought was dead from the ship crash, it was so good. Like I was like, you could feel it. And yeah, like just, they did such a good job.
I'm glad
those
you brought
flashbacks.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Wonderful.
Because I really love the kids actors in this. I thought that was like excellent acting from the kids. There was one scene in particular that like got me, and it got me on the second rewatch, because I think the first rewatch I was just focused on like what's going on, what's happening. But on my second watch of the second episode, where they shoot the leader of their, I'm assuming it's the leader, because like you said, there's no captions. We don't know what the kids are saying. But like she was definitely like some kind of a leader or mom figure to them. And there's one girl who like cries out and she's freaking out. And I started tearing up because I was like, oh my God, like this is so emotional. Like, and then I started thinking about like, you know, in episode 4, they talk about how they hung, you know, Andor's father and things like that. And I just thought, oh my God, are these children all abandoned children from parents who were killed because they fought against like the corporation that was mining their planet or something like that? Like, you know, so were these just kind of like abandoned children, like that just ended up in the woods fending for themselves, building their own little community, keeping each other safe? I just thought that was an incredible show of like the human spirit, enduring, surviving, like, you know, going forth, and then to see them deal with even more pain because their leader just got killed, and to see how Andor is starting to get angry, and you could see where those like where that foundation of that anger towards like the Empire and things like that is starting to build. It was really emotional.
Though it was really interesting to me because when they came in, they said the Republic, and so I'm like, I will be very fascinated to see like who was originally mining that world, because they do eventually say, oh, there was an accident with the Empire and the world was declared unfit to live on anymore. But the people who eventually become Cassian's adoptive mother and father, they say the Republic is coming. They don't say the Empire is coming. They say the Republic is coming. That. Yeah. So, because I think he's young enough that it might be like right on the cusp of the end of the Clone Wars. I would have to like do a little bit more looking into what the timelines exactly are, but they do say the Republic ships are coming, not the Empire ships are coming. So I will be very interested to know, I'm like, was this a world that the Republic was mining originally, or was it a world that the Separatists were mining originally? And how did the Empire come in, you know, at what point? And you know, like there's a lot of story there that I will be very fascinated to see the rest of, for sure.
So the Andor present day with Diego Luna's adult character is 5 years before Rogue One.
Yeah. I just mean, like, I would have to go back and, like, because I don't know if they said exactly how many years before, like, how many years before the flashback is. So I don't know exactly when it takes place, but it was just interesting to me that they said Republic and not Empire, because that kind of sets it a little bit before, at least a little bit before the end of the Clone Wars, which I found interesting.
Yeah, and that would be interesting. It'd be interesting to think that maybe there were no good guys even then.
Yeah.
With the Republic and that even they were mining for spaceships and for whatever materials that they needed. That. So more about his nihilist mentality, I guess. Just it's taking care of me and just a few people around me. But when you meet him in the show, he's not the person he was. The grizzled kind of like he was all but hopeless in Rogue One.
Yeah.
He was just kind of empty. And it wasn't until he regained his purpose in Rogue One, and I guess he finds it in this show. But he was rudderless at the beginning of this show. He didn't really have a direction. He really was just
looking for his sister.
Looking for his sister. That was it. He's looking for his sister. That's it. He's got intelligence for the rebellion. I mean, he knows what he's got to play and the different cards he's got. But it's only as a means to get him where he needs to go, not as some overarching plan. At least not at the beginning.
What I thought was interesting was, did Marva kidnap him? Do you consider that kidnapping? Because I mean, she picks him up to save him, but like,
yeah.
But even the guy that she was with was like, "Hey, he's got people here."
Exactly. Yeah, like I think we would need to know more about how, like, what they perceive the threat. Ooh, if I could talk today. I think we need to know more about what the threat that they perceived was. Because I've seen some people talk about that maybe Mara and her husband are separatists, or, they might just be pirates, for lack of a better word, where they don't have a side in that war before it ends. But, like, I kind of got her reasoning where she's like, oh, we can't leave them because they're going to be here and they're going to be looking through the ship and they're going to think that, because they're going to see the guy pumped full of darts, that the other kids killed. And so, like, I understand.
A lot of darts.
Yeah, a lot of darts. I was like, holy cow, guys. I mean, I get it, but man, I think we would need to know a lot more about what the threat was that they perceived. I understood that they wanted to help the kid, but also it's like, you don't take people away from their family, even if, maybe it's not the traditional family, but it's like, I was like, it'll be very interesting to see how, because I think that's definitely going to come into play again, where he obviously cares for his adoptive mother and cared for his adoptive father, but it'll be interesting to see how that all affected his outlook on everything, including, the rebellion and all that.
Right, because it wasn't with like Saw Gerrera where like Jyn was left with Saw, like
right,
she was left there to be protected and to Saw Gerrera was a family friend. This is like literally a stranger. So is there some kind of
he didn't even speak the same language?
No.
Right,
he didn't even speak. Yeah. They couldn't even communicate at first.
Yeah, and I did like that. One thing that I love is that they never made Diego Luna change his accent, because I love the idea that there's all these accents in the universe, and the universe in Star Wars is a big place and people speak differently. And, when they were looking for him, they referred to him as like a human with dark features, right? And so I really like the difference between like, oh, there's other alien races or whatever you want to call the other. So they were very specific that, he's a human, but I love that there was like so many accents and so much diversity and so much like that they didn't take away, because it felt more authentic than having like, a universe where everybody kind of looks the same and the only people that are different are like the aliens or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
So I like that, like you said, they didn't even speak the same language. And now you can kind of see that because he has this accent that's different from like his friends on that planet and Biggs and everybody else. He clearly sounds different. He's clearly not from around here. When I was watching the first episode with my son, he was like, did he just make like a racist comment against him when the police officer was like, did you swim over here? And I was like,
yeah, I caught that too. And I was like, oh God,
it hurt me.
Oh, we are doing
like,
some real life racism in this Star Wars. Okay.
But I think it was a good social commentary.
For sure. Yeah.
It made everything feel a little bit more grounded, because
No, it was authentic. And can we just say, I think having more British accents, the fact that everybody was British, or Scottish, or Irish, not just American, and with American accents, it takes it back to the original Star Wars trilogy, where it wasn't just the evil people with British accents, but you just have all these different accents, and it just again another feather in the cap, another part, another factor that I think makes this much more authentic and this world believable, and another plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm sorry, even the rain felt authentic to me. When the rain was falling on him, it kind of reminded me of the scene in where Obi-Wan is on Camino.
Yeah.
And it's like pouring on him. And sometimes I'm like, I can't believe these are sound stages, because to me it just felt real. And it's like,
Yeah,
I think they did a really good job of that.
Yeah, the set design, like we were saying earlier, the set design and world design of these first couple episodes is just gorgeous. Everything feels like a different planet, even though, obviously everything's going to be shot on Earth in some location or another. They've done a really great job of finding different places that look like different planets and building them.
And even like the technology seems like on Ferric, for example, like the technology seemed more realistic. Like the fact that like the way he dialed the phone didn't seem like the guy Tim, who basically
Tim
rats
with two
out
M's.
Tim with two M's.
It's the silliest Star Wars name, but I love it.
Actually, now that we're on the subject, I would like to talk about Tim. What did you guys think of his role in this film?
Jealous man, huh?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's just again, it's one of those characters where it's like you obviously know what he is doing is wrong, but to him, he thinks he's keeping this other, the woman that he loves safe because he doesn't know the context. He doesn't know what's going on. Well, especially because one of the other characters even points out later in the episode that there was no reward for that. That was just him like being like, oh, I think she's in danger. And hey, bonus, this way, I get to be with her instead of this guy.
Well, and I think that was his main motivation.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It wasn't that he was really looking out for her as much as he was eliminating the competition.
Yeah. I think in his head, he probably thought, oh, I'm just safe. But like realistically, no, for sure.
He rationalized it for sure, but you could believe it. Like I understood his motivation 100%. Like I got it, and it was believable. And you're like, I know exactly what's happening, and I can tell you what's going to happen. But I still want to see it happen because that's how good it was. It was how well done it was. He's going to tell him. I know it.
And I don't just think he deserved to die for it. What he did was shitty. He should not have done that. It was not okay. But like, I did feel bad for Vix because there she was handcuffed and like, having to like sit there and just look at his body. Well, I can't even imagine what that was like. Like, and Vix's character seemed really like complex and not just very one thing, like, so she clearly like cared about this man, Tim, while she was also doing a bunch of shady stuff on the side and transporting all kinds of stuff, whether it was to the rebellion or for whatever reasons, she was just out there like everybody else trying to survive. But I thought there was something really cool about their relationship, which was she was taking the lead on the romantic part. She shows up at his place. She has like all this agency over. She clearly wants to be with Tim. She's just caught up in all of these other things. And I don't think I've ever seen something like that, like on a Star Wars show, where this like woman has all this agency and she's like, I'm about to do my thing. I got this shady stuff, but I'm going to come see you afterwards, Yeah. And she doesn't do it for any other reason other than I want to be here. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if it means anything, but I just thought it was interesting to have a character who had that kind of like, just because Andor's the lead doesn't mean I'm like falling all over you. Although clearly they had some kind of relationship, right?
Yeah.
But she still, wasn't chasing after him or anything like that. So to see her handcuffed there and the dude that she like clearly cares about is just, regardless of the fact that he did something awful,
right? He's
there, just laying there. It was a lot.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And I think we're going to see more of her too, because just for the fact that I forget if it was Star Wars or D23 or one of those sites posted a get to know the characters, and she was on that list. So I'm like, I don't think it's just going to be those 3 episodes. So I think it'll be interesting to see where she pops up again and how and in what context too. So
they had 159 speaking roles.
Yeah, I was reading that in the production notes. I'm like, that's going to be a lot of people, but all right. I love some good new characters.
But I think it did a lot of good for like the, at least in my opinion, I think it did a lot of good for the world building, because there was like a time when there was like that the guy that was arranging transportation for Cassian.
Yeah.
And he was arguing with the other alien about like, you know, things in the background. You don't know what this is. You don't know. And I was like, oh, wow, that's such a like interesting little dynamic. I was like, I wouldn't mind seeing like a short of them two just like working or something.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like almost every single character that's been in this, I'm like, I want to know more about you. I'm like, I want to know what your story is. I want to know what's going on with you, you know, because just like you said, the world building in this has been phenomenal. You know, they've done a really good job just making you interested in all of the characters and what they've got going on, no matter how much or how little they are on screen for at any given time. Like even the trio of workers that was, you know, keeping an eye out for the messages from, you know, to try to find Cassian. Like you could tell they had like
the noodles.
And like you can tell, I'm like
Blue noodles.
Yeah, blue noodles. I'm like, man, you know, I'm like, you could make a fun little like 15-minute sitcom short with them because they just seem like they're fun, even though, you know, they're obviously like within the context of the show, not the good guys by any means, but they were, I'm like, all these characters are really well fleshed out and thought about, especially the I know we haven't talked about episode 4 a whole lot, but the group of characters in episode 4 that we meet too, their stories were all really fascinating, even though you don't like get told precisely everything up front. You know, you learn little bits and pieces about the different characters, and like you said, it's really good world building with this show.
Well, yeah, I think you get that from every episode and every piece that they've introduced so far. They do such a good job of telling you just enough. I know exactly how that corporation runs for the most part, based on I'm informed enough from other movies and other media to be able to tell, okay, I know how that corporation works. I know a person just like that. I know those 3 analysts that are like, we're just doing our job, man. And you got this overzealous boss that has unrealistic expectations and really doesn't understand the ins and outs, you know, and is telling you your job as if he knows how to do it better than you do. And, you know, and so it's like so many of these things were relatable, even though it was in Star Wars universe. And I think all of that, and then you know, you get a little bit more on you know, on Cassian and his family. They start talking, or they don't even speak English, they don't even speak a decipherable language, and there's no subtitles, but just from the way they interact with one another, I know exactly what's going on with that dynamic, who's in charge, kind of the hierarchy of the people, you know, where Cassian kind of seems to fit. They didn't even want him on that expedition, you know. They reluctantly allowed him to come, and I watched it 3 times, and I'm still not sure they really knew he was there until he had done something that nobody else had done. They're like, come on, hurry up, you know. So yeah, they've done such a good job of, and I think I saw a video on a YouTube channel, Hello Future Me. He's a writer. He does a lot of great stuff. But on this episode, he talks about show don't tell, and you know, that instead of having that exposition, there's just so much going on that if you're not paying attention, you'll miss so much of the story that's informed just by interactions or looks or you know, dialogue that has no subtitles, but everything else that's going on in that interaction. It's not just 2 people standing in a CGI room. You know, it's a real set with authentic interactions with one another that really inform what's going on and build that world. So again, I can't speak highly enough, especially for all 4 episodes, but the first 3 did just such a great job of building that world.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things because I think Rogue One is like my favorite Star Wars movie, right? And I think that it was because it introduced all this non-Skywalker stuff, right? There was no other Jedis in the movie. It was just all these like side characters. And I was always really, really interested in Bodhi's character, the pilot. And I was like, you know, what was his job like? He was just a pilot. He was no one. Did he have family back home? Like, what did he risk? Like, you know, leaving to take Galen Erso's message to Saul Guerrera, right? Yeah. What did Galen say to him that moved him so much that he was like, oh, I'm going to forego my paycheck this week and go on this crazy mission to like deliver these things? And like, like, what did he give up? Because he could have just been a pilot coming in, coming out, doing his job, clocking in for work, clocking out, leaving. And I just, like, I always thought about him. So I'm so excited that we're finally getting, like, these stories from Star Wars, these little side stories that don't necessarily tie into the full narrative of, you know, like, the Star Wars stories. And they're just these little characters that exist in this universe. And I'm excited because this show has, like, at least to me, proved that it works, that Star Wars could branch out and do a ton of different things and not even mention a Jedi. And it still feels like Star Wars, and it still feels really good.
Exactly. Yeah, like, I think one of the things that the show's done really well so far, and I'm sure will continue to do, is just showing how outside of big things like the Death Star or the TIE Fighter initiative in Rebels, how the Empire and its subsidiaries, how it affects everybody's day-to-day life. Even if, you know, you don't have stormtroopers patrolling the streets, there's still that presence. There's still things that they're feeling where this is not right. This is not how things should be. And you're just seeing how it affects the day-to-day lives of just ordinary people, which I think is going to be a really interesting thing to follow in this show.
I know Elizabeth's probably tired of hearing me talk about The Expanse, but The Expanse is probably one of my favorite sci-fi series of all time, if not my top favorite show of all time, right? And one of the things that I loved about that show is that it's so grounded in reality, and it's sci-fi, but it feels real. It feels like all the issues that they're dealing with are issues that we deal with now. And I kind of feel like Andor is the same way. And when I was talking to the writers and the creator of the show, I asked them, like, how do you keep it, like, feeling so real? And the way that they responded was, like, there's 5 problems that humans have faced over history. So as long as you write about those, like, 5 problems, like, it just keeps cycling over and over. Eventually the news catches up and it feels like something that you're going through. Like, people are very simple. They have the same 5 problems: power, money, sex, love, whatever it is, right? And so, and I feel like Rogue One is exactly that. Like, everything feels relevant because it doesn't matter if you're in a galaxy far, far away, a long, long time ago. They're all dealing with the same corruption, the same social, economic issues. And at the bottom of it, corruption and greed and power kind of, like, you know, making life harder for everybody else. So I don't know. I just think that the world building and everything and just making it feel grounded in reality has been so great on this show.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm excited to see what's coming in the future based on what we've seen in episode 4, because we saw how, like, the lower classes and the people who are out on the outer rims and mid-rim territories deal with it. But then we see in episode 4 what the rich and the elite deal with.
Yeah.
And it was nice to kind of see, like, that type of reality, right? Like, completely different worlds. What did you guys think about episode 4?
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about when I was watching it, again, drawing parallels to Rebels, because Rebels season 1 is taking place about roughly the same time as the first season of Andor is. So Rebels is a lot of, like, outer rim and further stuff, where this is going to be, seems like, more mid-rim and central worlds. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to see more of how the Senate works under the Empire, because the Senate, you know, they're just there to try to kind of keep people being like, oh no, you still have representation, it's fine, you know, whatever. So I'm very interested to see more of Mon Mothma's story, especially knowing what we do about her eventual role in the rebellion. I'm kind of hoping that maybe we see, I don't think it would be this season, it'll probably be season 2, because this season covers 1 year and season 2 is going to cover, like, basically the next 4 years leading up to Rogue One. But I'm very interested to see if we might see the catalyst for, because there's an episode of Rebels where we see her, you know, they're basically transporting her away from Coruscant to get to the rebellion because she is defected. She has finally said enough is enough. And I will be really interested to see what that catalyst is. I hope that they do something with that. And it's also really cool to see her home life too, because I hadn't even, like, thought about the fact that she had a husband, you know, until he popped up and she's, like, all annoyed with him too. Because it seems like I mean, I was reading, she's not a huge part, well, I guess she's a pretty decent part of the book that recently came out, The Princess and the Scoundrel, which is about Han and Leia's wedding and then subsequent honeymoon. And she is from Chandrila, which is this big, huge, they talk about it in the book a bit where, they're a star cruiser and, luxury and everything. And part of the story is like, oh, she's got family connections to the Chandrila Starliner. And so that's how she sets Han and Leia up with their honeymoon. And it's just really fascinating I think it'll be really cool to see how, what fuels her to be like, hey, you know what, this isn't okay. Because we see a little bit of that in Clone Wars, but, she comes from such a wealthy, well-to-do planet that, maybe, the Empire's kind of taking over some of the private businesses to fuel their own expansion and fuel their own starships and everything. But she maybe is not who you would expect to become a central part of a rebellion against a government, because she is from such a well-to-do planet. And, for the most part, maybe it doesn't really affect her, at least not on, in any huge ways. So I think it'll be really interesting to see that. I think it'll be really cool to see more of the ISB, which is, again, something that they've brought in from Rebels. I don't think we're going to see
that?
You're going to make me remember what it actually stands for. The ISB is, if I can remember, but it's basically a security bureau, kind of like CIA kind of
Imperial Security something, yeah.
Yes,
something.
Thank you. Imperial Security Bureau, where they're basically kind of in charge of making sure, squashing any sort of rebellions, looking for patterns, looking for, places where there might be people who are, they're not just stealing to steal, they're stealing to make an impact against the Empire, organizing against them. And we see that, that was something that was a concept that was introduced in Rebels with Agent Callus, who is a pretty big part of, he gives the rebels in Rebels a hard time for a really long time before he comes to realize, like, hey, maybe the Empire kind of sucks because they left me for a really long time on this cold planet. And the guy that I thought was my enemy actually was really nice to me and made sure that I survived long enough to get back home. And, he knows that he wouldn't have done that if he had been in Zeb's position. And so it'll be really interesting to see more of that, especially seeing how they operate centrally. It was really cool to see that big round table meeting of just all these people being whatever. And it was cool because they did mention Ryloth, which is the planet that the Twi'leks are from, and that is an early episode of Rebels as well. And it'll be really interesting to see how that works and see more of that central, to see, especially because one of the main villains, I am forgetting her name, the lady that we meet in episode 4. They talked a little bit about how it's going to be showing her trying to climb the ranks in the ISB and try to get more power. And we see that in episode 4 too, where she's like, this should be under my jurisdiction because guess what? This involves something that happened in my area. So
wasn't Thrawn in charge of the ISB? Or I know he's involved with them.
I know he's involved. Because he's Grand Admiral Thrawn, so I don't know if he's more of the ships and everything, because his big thing was the TIE Fighter program. At least I know there's books. I haven't read the books. I just mostly know them from Rebels, from the TV show.
I read the first one, and I've read part of the second one. I haven't finished it, but I want to say that was where he started in his climb through the ranks, was through the ISB, because he almost has a force-sensitive ability to predict tactically, mm-hmm. And so he can almost read the tea leaves, and he's 4 moves ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
But he always did it the right way, he always did it with honor. Mm-hmm. But the ISB it's just like any other intelligence group, CIA, FBI, whatever. If they needed to topple the government, they topple the government. Please, Big Brother, don't come get me. But just the idea that you've got, she may be one of the biggest, most evil villains that we've seen, just because she comes from that ilk. She is someone who is ambitious, and she's intelligent, and she is a part of a group whose purpose is to with a smile on their face, quell rebellions. Like,
right.
Shut it down, cut the head off the stake and do it without anybody ever knowing that they were there. Unlike the idiot that was doing, the reconnaissance before.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
how funny was it? It was so funny to me, but almost cringy, like in an Office sort of way, when he's up there just floundering around trying to give his speech, and his men are like rolling their eyes. And then he's got his deputy who's just like the only person that way to go. He's like pats him on the shoulder.
That is a wonderful comparison, The Office. And I would like a spin-off series of that corporate office, and he's like the Michael Scott and his deputy is Dwight.
Kylo Ren. Do you remember the
right?
I think the Saturday Night Live Kylo Ren where he's just he's
God.
He's inept with everything that he does, and everybody's like just cleaning up after him. That's how I felt like this guy is. Oh yeah, undercover boss. That's what it is. I'm not Kylo.
And then I quote that all the time too.
I don't know if you guys played the Star Wars video games, but Stellan Skarsgård's character, he's like a collector, right? In his little boutique that he has with all the collectibles. When Mon Mothma comes in, they showed a costume that looked very similar to the Star Killer costume from the video game. It's in the backdrop, and I know we were not supposed to take screenshots. Disney, don't come out. But I took a picture of it. And
nobody did. What are you talking about?
He didn't share it or anything. It was just for research purposes.
It was for research, and it looks, if you put it side by side to the Star Killer costume, it's almost identical. So I thought that was very interesting. It was like standing behind him on like a display, like on a mount, like a dress form or something.
Yeah,
and when he walks with Mon Mothma to the back, and they're talking in private, while the driver's just hanging out there.
The driver is definitely a spy.
Yeah, and there's definitely like other collectibles that I'm like, that looks so familiar, but I don't know where it's from. Yeah, so I can't wait for the internet to take hold of
Nerdist.
This.
I was gonna say there's one, I forget where I saw it, but I might have been on TikTok or something. One of the TV spots that they released shows a brief second of that scene, and somebody pointed out that you can see it's not we don't know for sure if it's Plo Koon's mask, but you see a similar mask to Plo Koon's in the background of one of the shots in the TV spots. Everybody's like, "Ooh, what?" So I can't wait to find out more about what his deal is between being, kind of a early organizer for the rebellion apparently, but also running this boutique collection shop as kind of a front for an excuse to talk to Mon Mothma, and also to kind of have a reason for why he's always traveling all over the place,
And not only that, but it's almost money laundering as well, right? If you kind of funnel money into the rebellion, right? You can be like, I sell these collectibles, I sold them for this much, but I pocketed this much or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an interesting situation that he's in, and
I'll be very interested to know who he's thinking of bringing in, because Bail Organa was very early on rebellion leader. I mean, granted, who knows how much of some of the books that kind of got published in between period of Disney buying Lucasfilm and then continuing on with more stories, because I think the Ahsoka novel kind of falls in a weird gray area with that. Especially because it seems like one of the Tales of the Jedi might slightly contradict the book, but part of the story in the Ahsoka novel is, and this is spoilers if you're the Ahsoka novel is very good. Go read it if you haven't. But
it is good. It's very good.
I loved it, but part of the story in that is Bail Organa realizing that Ahsoka is alive and recruiting her very early on. I think it's about a year. It's set about a year after the Empire takes over. No, I know it's set a year after the Empire takes over, because that was one of the things I researched for my article about the Obi-Wan series and the timelines and everything. He recruits Ahsoka very, very early on to become Fulcrum, essentially seeing, looking for ways that they can fight against the Empire, looking for people who can, help them with their cause of helping people that the Empire won't, or the Empire is oppressing. in one way or another. So I'll be very interested to see, I'm like, are Mon, at this point, do Mon and Bail not know that the other one is, that they're both kind of fighting, the same fight?
I would like it better.
But
if they didn't,
yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I'm very interested to see, because just again from Rebels, we know that this is still early enough where there's different pockets of rebellion, but they haven't all really coalesced yet. It's not until a few years, later until they're just kind of by necessity because of Thrawn, because of other people coming after them, that they finally have to come together just for their own protection. So I'll be very interested to see how that story goes too, because I think there's just so much, and like I would love it if we didn't get any huge cameos outside of Mon Mothma, and I don't think she really counts as a cameo because she is going to be a very central character in this show. But I think if we see any characters from Rebels outside of Mon Mothma or Bail Organa, I don't think we're going to see them until season 2, apart from maybe Ahsoka as Fulcrum.
We're definitely getting Saw Gerrera.
Yes, Saw Gerrera is going to be an issue. Yeah,
he will be here.
He's in everything.
When or where we see him? Oh, hello, puppy. When or where we see that Saw Gerrera is, it might just be a cameo, right, but we're definitely going to start to see that. Yeah. But I don't think Cassian Andor meets Saw Gerrera, because in Rogue One he doesn't know Saw Gerrera he's Saw Gerrera's prisoner. So it might be something kind of happening. Or at the very least,
they don't, end well.
Right. Because he ends up his prisoner and doesn't really feel like they know each other. So I think, if anything, it'll be one of those like, oh, this is happening on this other planet, or they may refer to Saw Gerrera, show scenes of what he's doing or whatever, or maybe he's, with Mon Mothma. And they just don't cross paths. I don't know. Yeah, I don't see where Andor and Saw would cross paths.
Yeah, because in Rebels, there is a bit of a storyline where they talk about Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera really going like head to head in their different approaches to the rebellion, because they talk about how Saw is a lot more willing to, kill people and blow stuff up and play dirty. It's not, exactly where Mon Mothma and the rebellion that we're most familiar with, they're very much like, if we can get away with not hurting anybody, we will not hurt anybody. But if we have to, jump in some starfighters and blow some stuff up, that's what we're going to have to do. But they are, especially the episode, I can't remember what it's called, but the episode where they are on the world with all the bugs that built the battle droids.
Geonosis.
Thank you. It's been a long weekend. When they are on that world, and that is an episode with Saw. Saw, they go to find Saw because they've lost contact with him and his team. And so they send the ghost crew to go and see him. We see a huge difference in how the rebels that are more aligned with like Mon Mothma's side of the rebellion versus Saw's, because Saw is like, we're gonna take this bug captive, we're gonna like make him talk, we're gonna bring him, and Kanan and Ezra and Sabine and Zeb are like, no, this is his world, we need to find out what he is trying to tell us. We can't just kidnap him because he's the only one here, and you think that he's the reason why your men disappeared or whatever. So it'll be really interesting to see more of how these different sides of the rebellion come together and sometimes work together and sometimes don't.
And I think the only other cameo we'll probably get is that I know they've already, as far as on the cast roster, Ellen Tudyk as K2SO. Yes. So at some point
to see how they meet.
Yay.
Yeah, so we should get that at some point. But
I think I remember pretty early on they said that K2SO will not be in season 1, but he will be in season 2. So it'll probably be later in the season. But I do think it's entirely possible that in season 2 we might see some of the Ghost crew. But again, kind of like, even though She-Hulk likes to be like, this is not a cameo every week show, haha. All the cameos in She-Hulk have made sense. I hope that, if they try to bring in some of the other characters, that it makes sense. Like, I definitely think we'll see Bail Organa, because it's just, they brought him back for Obi-Wan. I'm sure he would be happy to be in this show too. But if we see anybody outside of Bail, Mon Mothma, maybe Leia, I'd be surprised. And then, like I said, Ahsoka, but I don't think we will see Ahsoka. I think we will just see her fulcrum symbol and her disguised voice that we get really early on in Rebels, as part of maybe something that Cassian gets himself into. But
couldn't Freddie Prinze Jr. absolutely play Kanan? I mean, he could absolutely play him. Here's the thing too. Now you've got me thinking about that. He was supposed to be at New York Comic Con, but he pulled out. And I know they are starting, if they have not already started production on Andor season 2, they are starting very soon. And I'm like, if I see Kanan Jarrus in live action, I will cry because I love him and Hera so much. I think you might see her.
Oh my God.
You could see her.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think, I definitely think we will probably, because she gets mentioned, like it's a very like background noise thing, but you hear the name Captain Syndulla in Rogue One. You see Chopper for like a couple seconds. So, but again, I don't think that I think they're going to spend most of this first season, which is one entire year of Cassian's life leading up to Rogue One. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of those characters, but I think maybe in season 2 we might see some of that. But again, I hope that it's in service to his story, not just for the fun of it, even though I would love to see the entire Ghost crew, especially because they have all of them casted already, apart from Kanan, unless they're doing some Force Ghost thing in Ahsoka, because Disney, no, I did not see a bootleg version of the Ahsoka trailer from Star Wars Celebration. That did not happen. But we know that they have those people cast. We know that they have Sabine cast. We know who Sabine is being played by. We know that Hera is in it. We know that Chopper is in it. We know that we're going to see Ezra at some point, though I'm sure they would have to.
Ezra looks just like as the guy that was cast for Ezra looks just like Ezra.
Yeah.
They did a great job of all that.
Yeah, I mean, if they were going to have Ezra in Andor, they'd have to cast somebody younger. They might even cast somebody younger for Sabine as well, if these people show up. But yeah, if we see Freddie Prinze Jr.'s Kanan in live action, I will be inconsolable and obnoxious for at least a week.
Well, and I think that really just kind of hypes up the whole idea that I really think that these extended Star Wars universes in the Disney Plus shows, they're great. They're giving us so much. I don't know if you guys saw Star Wars Visions, like the animated shorts.
Yeah.
But that was absolutely beautiful storytelling. I would love to see some of those translated into live action. There's so much room for storytelling. I think Andor proved that you can have different types of storytelling, and it doesn't have to be like the same tone for Star Wars, and it still works as a Star Wars show. I really felt like it was very different. But before we wrap up, do you guys have any favorite characters, favorite moments, favorite things that you just really enjoyed? Because I think, or any criticisms, because I feel for the most part we've been very speaking very highly of the series.
I mean, I just Cassian's been such a you get a bit of his story in Rogue One, but I love it when they are able to do these shows and flesh out these characters more. I really liked Bix. Like I said, I hope we see more of her. I really think we're gonna have a love to hate relationship with. Why am I so bad with names? With the deputy guy from the Corpos and the lady from ISB. It's just
Serial Karn is
yes.
And Deidre Miro.
Deidre, yes. I'm also very fascinated to know more about the guy who recruits Cassian, especially his whole, because it's not just that he, has an excuse to be off planet all the time. He's, he has, a disguise for his front. There's just so much, and especially seeing more of Mon Mothma's life, even just the little bit that we saw in episode 4 with her and her husband, and she's got this dinner that she has to worry about. It's I can't imagine, it's going to be really fast. Like I said before, it's going to be fascinating to see more of her story as well, because she is such a central figure to the rebellion eventually, but she's having to pretend to be chill with all these people that she like absolutely knows are doing horrendous things in the name of the Empire. And I, so far, I mean, I can't think of any criticisms offhand. They've done a really great job with, like we've said, with the sets, with the costuming, with the world building, with all of the like just little bit side characters, fleshing everybody out. I just hope that continues and doesn't stop. Like they stopped doing end credit scenes 4 episodes after She-Hulk was over. I was like, but I thought that was gonna be, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, it's just been really good. I can't wait to see more. Again, if they do cameos, if they bring in other fan favorite characters, I hope that they do it in a way that services Cassian's story, because this is called Andor. This is called Andor, not, the rebellion or anything. It's about him. So as long as they bring in any other characters that they bring in, service his story and connect to his story in a meaningful way, I'll be happy.
No, I agree. No, I don't have any serious criticisms about this show. I think it's because of how well it's been cast and how well it's written and shot. There's just anything that I have to say to criticize it, I think is would be nitpicky. I really don't have anything negative to say. I think it's just done very well, and I had something. I think I was a little bit more profound than I just agree. But I can't remember exactly what it was. This is probably the like I said from the beginning. My first comment was this is the best Star Wars show I think that they've come out with so far. One of the best original Star Wars stories that I have watched or read. And I read most of the expanded universe, starting with the Yuuzhan Vong. Like I've read all of those books. I still have most of them. The original Thrawn series. There are characters that I would love for them to see. I would love to see. But like Thrawn's probably one that I want to see more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
If we don't see him in this, I'm sure we'll see him in the Ahsoka series, because he is terrifying in the best way possible.
He is one of the best villains and one of the purest ones,
Yeah, especially because he's just, like I said, when that one guy showed up, I was like, oh, are you going to be the Thrawn of the series? And then immediately he just messed up so bad. I was like, no, you want to be Thrawn. You want to be very, like, nitpicky, knowledgeable, but no, dude, come on. And it'll be really interesting to see more of his story, too, especially when he goes back to his family on Coruscant. And it doesn't seem like his family is from, like, the lower levels of Coruscant, but he's definitely not, from a very affluent family either. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, too.
And they mentioned him in The Mandalorian already, so I'm sure we're going to see him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When?
Yeah.
I think it's in the Ahsoka episode that they mention him.
Yes.
So.
Where is your master? Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?
Exactly. So I'm sure we'll see him in the Ahsoka series. It is exciting. I don't have, like Stacy said, if I even said anything, it would be nitpicking. I thought the action so far has been great for like spy thriller action. I think that the casting is beautifully done. They did a gorgeous job with the casting. I think the kids on that planet that Cassian is from were just absolutely incredible little actors, and I hope that they keep going back to the flashbacks, because those seem like really interesting stories. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what happens with his sister. Does he find her? Does he not? Like, who did she grow up to be? Is she mad at Cassian? Does she just not know what happened to him? Like, there's so many things that I can't wait to figure out. I hope we get some of those answers by the end of season 1, but at least I know we're getting a season 2. So
yes. And 12 episodes too. Like that. Right. My goodness. Like, I get that they've got budget, they've got different metrics or whatever, but I'm like, 12 episodes, 24 episodes for the entire run of this series. Yes, like that is great, and I'm so happy about that. I think like my one nitpicky thing that kind of threw me a little bit, I think I told you about this, was the fact that the ISB office looked like the Epcot ball was a bit of a I mean, I get it because it's white and it's, modernist, whatever. But I'm like, why are we inside the Epcot ball at the ISB offices? But it works. It just it threw me for a second where I'm like, that's the Epcot ball.
Yeah, no, I've been so excited. I'm excited for the Thanksgiving finale because I think it drops on Thanksgiving weekend. So I think it'll be a nice long fall season. Super excited about it. I love Diego Luna. I think he's doing an excellent job. His acting, the writing on the show is really great. Just the direction, the cinematography. Oh my God, I cannot get over the shots and the sets. And
I know, especially I keep saying the editing and the shots of the final shots of episode 3. I was just like, this is gorgeous and such great storytelling and drawing the parallels. I'm just like, oh, it's good.
All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Not really. I can't wait to see what else they do. And I am also, thank you, Disney Plus, for finally putting Star Wars and Marvel on different days. Because as somebody who works a 9 to 5 on Wednesdays, oh my goodness, getting up early to watch 2 episodes of something. Yeah, thank you for finally changing that around.
Well, then it gives you something to look forward to 2 days.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
What a time to be a geek. We have Star Wars on Wednesday, Marvel on Thursdays, Lord of the Rings on Fridays, Sundays is Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. It's just, I'm blown away by the amount of content. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is going to wrap up this episode of the Temple of Geek Podcast. We want to thank everyone who tuned in today, and especially our 2 guests, Stacy and Elizabeth. It was so nice to talk to both of you today. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram using the handle Temple of Geek. Do you want to check out some of our other episodes or shows? Why don't you head on over to templeofgeek.com. There you will find all sorts of content that pertains to the world of geek.
Please follow us on Twitter at Temple of Geek. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Temple of Geek. And remember to visit templeofgeek.com, your one stop for all things geek.
Goodbye.
This will conclude our transmission.